Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the September Community Development Committee meeting. We'll start tonight the way we always do by introducing ourselves and saying who we represent.
Dick Kesslink. I represent the Ag Committee for St. Croix County.
I'm Scott Coner. I'm supervisor for District 11, which is Star Prairie, most of Star Prairie Township, Stanton Township, and the village of Star Prairie.
Sean Anderson, District 2, which is about half of the Somerset Township and half of St. Joseph.
Judy Achterhoff, District 17, which is Silen, Forest, Deer Park, Emerald, Glenwood, and Glenwood City, and I always have to be so careful that I make sure I remember all 6 of them.
Ed Schockner, District 1, parts of the town of Somerset and the village of Somerset.
I'm Dan Hansen. I represent District 12, which is the north half of New Richmond and a small part of Star Prairie Township.
Ellen Denzer, Community Development Director.
Ken Witt, the Interim County Administrator.
Julie Peterson, Community Development.
Very good. We also have Mr. Bill Peavy, the County Board Vice Chairman, in the audience. Now I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Are there any public comments? Anybody like to make a comment from the public? Anything on or off the agenda? Yes, sir?
I'd like to make a comment. My name is Chuck Edson.
We'll ask you to walk up to the
Right here. Thank you. My name is Chuck Edson. I'm a member of the Bass Lake Association. I live on Bass Lake. I'm on the southwest end, so my address is actually Hudson. I just wanted to thank the committee for reading, listening, and thinking about having a pay station on the north end of Bass Lake. So we appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Chuck. Now, I know that you filled out the one form, but because this is a different type of public comment, would you mind filling out the littler one so we can keep a different type of record? I appreciate that very much. All right, anybody else? All right, thank you. Now we're going to move into our public hearing, which is a public hearing on the ordinance amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance map, Chapter 15, towns of Baldwin, Caddy, Silan, Ogallie, Emerald, Aaron Prairie, Glenwood, Kinnickinnick, Pleasant Valley, Rush River, Springfield, Stanton, and Star Prairie. And we'll be looking for a staff report from John Hilgers.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. The first item on your agenda tonight is a public hearing to amend the Chapter 15 zoning map. Before we get into a few of the details, a little bit of background on this public hearing. As most of you know, back in 2017, St. Croix County began a comprehensive revision to the zoning ordinance and zoning map. So from 2017 to 2019, we worked very hard with our townships and our property owners on crafting a new zoning code and zoning map that would kind of bring us up to date, taking into account some of the newly adopted state statutes and just generally modernizing our county code. As part of that process, we ended up having the county board ultimately approve the new zoning map and zoning ordinance on November 4th, 2019. As part of that approval process, the county board issued a 180-day grace period where towns and property owners could consider changing the zoning of parcels. And I think the main reason why we did that is because as part of our update process, we reviewed and analyzed about 22,000 parcels that are under county jurisdiction. And we wanted to make sure that we gave that extra 6 months to towns to make sure that they were where they needed to be with the zoning map. The 6-month period ended on May 4th, 2019, or 2020, excuse me, but due to COVID-19, we extended that period to July 24th. So we were going until July 24th in terms of accepting zoning change forms from property owners and towns. We identified a very strict procedure that people could follow in terms of submitting those applications and having the town review those. As part of that process, we needed to adopt some parameters that people needed to follow and towns needed to follow to have their property zoning requests considered. The changes that are before you tonight needed to be consistent with the town comprehensive plan. The changes could not result in an upzoning, which is basically rezoning a parcel from a residential or ag to a more intense land use like commercial or industrial. And most importantly, the town needed to consent or recommend approval of these requests. So for purposes of your packet tonight, we created a 3-page matrix that goes into detail regarding the property owner, the parcel identification number, what the zoning change request is, the number of acres changed, and the township. And if you go to the 4th page of the document that itemizes the requests, we kind of have a summary acreage total by town. And you'll see that overall between the 13 towns that have submitted requests, it totals about 2,900 acres. To put that into perspective, there's about 370,000 acres under county zoning jurisdiction. So really it's a fraction of 1% that we're talking about tonight. And then going back up, you'll see that there's a corresponding map number on the matrix. That map number corresponds to the maps that are shown in your packet by town. We itemized, let's see here. So there's 13 different maps in your packet. The number you see on the map corresponds to the matrix. And again, there's 13 maps. I'm not going to shuffle through all those, but we got the packet out about a week or two ago. So I guess if there's any questions or comments or thoughts that the board has in any specific one, staff would be happy to answer that. But essentially, that is where we're at. This is basically going to be the final phase in the comprehensive revision process. Pending your approval tonight, this would go to the county board in early October. I think I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions any of the committee members have.
Of course. Two just out of curiosity questions. One is, were there more or less than you thought there would be, or did you have no idea?
When we first thought, we thought there would be between 40 and 50. So it's very much in the ballpark. There's 56 requests. If you look at the matrix, the bulk of them are from Katy, and that would make sense. They are new to zoning, so they needed to get acquainted with the zoning process, and we actually had an additional meeting with the town board a few months ago to kind of walk through the change process. And I think if you look, I'm not sure how many there were, but I think there were 15 or 20 so from the town of Katy. Oh, maybe not that many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Seven, 8. Yeah, so there were about 16 from the town of Katy. The other township that had a fair number was Pleasant Valley. They had approximately 10.
And second part is, how many requests did you have to turn down because they didn't fit?
So there were about 6 that we needed to have the town go back and modify. Because in some cases, property owners, and this was true in Pleasant Valley, they were desiring to go from an agricultural district to an R2, which is our higher density residential district. But their comp plan didn't support the R2 zoning. It did, however, support an R1 zoning. So they kind of met halfway, consistent with their comp plan. They're going to be able to go from an ag district to an R1 district, but not the R2. And again, we had to review the comp plan for each of these requests to make sure they were consistent, and then communicate with the towns if they were not, to make sure they understood what was happening. Mhm.
Other questions from the committee? Do we have any questions from the public? Mr. Edston, did you want to ask a question? No? Sir? If you would come up to the podium, please.
My name is Ty Dodge. I'm here on behalf of the Valancourts. This was kind of a late request, and I don't know, John, correct me if that got into the packet?
They had copies of the material.
They do have copies of the material. Okay, so I was just going to go through that. There's a letter from the township and an explanation of what was occurring with that project. A development was proposed under the prior zoning, rural residential, and was in process with the town prior to them adopting in August the zoning. That's Star Prairie, correct. So then we spoke to the town, and it was an oversight on their part that that was not addressed before that was submitted. So if there are any questions about it, I can answer those. Otherwise, I'll just defer. And
My understanding is we'll be able to get that on our agenda hopefully next month.
okay,
I'm pretty sure.
so that one would not fall on tonight's meeting.
It won't be included in any resolution passed today, I'm sorry
Okay.
to say, but thank you for bringing it to the attention of the township and getting it moved forward.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from the public or the committee? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing and begin the business items, which the first is the ordinance amending comprehensive zoning ordinance map, chapter 15, which is Mr. Hilgers.
Yep, I'm just going to bring up the resolution on the screen for your consideration tonight. I do not have anything else to add, unless there's other,
I'm sorry, John.
unless there's
I thought you
other
were-
specific questions or comments that any
No,
committee
that's
members
good.
have.
I would look for, if anybody has a question, if nobody has a question, I'd look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution that's on page 9 of our packet tonight, and I'm not going to go through and say all the names if I don't have to.
You don't have to. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Business item number 2, resolution approving Troy text amendments to the Town of Troy zoning ordinance, and it's all printed here in the packet, which I'll allow to stand as printed. Again, John Hilgers is going to explain this to us.
Yes, so the Town of Troy request is kind of a two-part request. They have made some changes to their zoning ordinance and zoning map. And under state statute in Wisconsin, even though the Town of Troy has their own zoning ordinance, St. Croix County still needs to approve those zoning changes. Let me just try and get to the material here. So the first request is a text amendment that's detailed on Exhibit A of your packet on page 33. And basically what the town is seeking to do is to add a new use under their conditional use provisions that would allow custom vehicle painting and motorcycle painting within their general retail and service district. And they have the language shown here. And then the second request would be a rezoning. Oh, did somebody have a question? Oh, my fault. The second request would be to amend their zoning map to rezone a 5.5 acre parcel on Glover Road, and I'll get to the map here in just a moment. Kind of froze up on me. But anyway, it's a 5.5 acre parcel off of Glover Road, and it's located almost adjacent to their town hall, so it's fairly close to Highway 35. The parcel is within their comp plan designation of corridor commercial. So here it is, finally. I think it's just, computer's just slow. But within the packet, we've provided the town plan commission and town board minutes that support that decision. Oh, boy. And so for purposes of tonight, we did create two different resolutions, one for the text amendment change and then one for the zoning map change.
So if I understand it, we need to approve their text amendment, and then we need to approve the actual zoning map?
Yeah, so it's two different requests, or at least we're treating it as two different requests. That's why there's two different resolutions in your packet.
So let's move that forward. I'll entertain a motion for the text amendment. Unless we have a question.
So is this for the first one on page 30 that we're doing now?
Page 31.
I'm sorry, I can't get there with this. Just.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's the cover. Yeah, you're correct, on page 31. Yep, okay. I'll make a motion to move the ordinance resolution approving Troy text amendments to the town of Troy, et cetera, to 3N 0.4.
Just a second.
I'll second.
Scott, did you have a question just before? Yes. Use your microphone, please.
First off, if I can, Mr. Chair, I just want to see, is there anybody here from Troy Township? Not tonight, okay. I guess there's two, this is more for the second issue than the first one here, but it possibly refers to the first one too, is that Troy Township has been under a purchase of development rights in their township. And with purchase of development rights, some of these properties had deed restrictions that were placed on them, which other places such as Troyburn had purchased development rights to from other landowners that had agricultural parcels. And in the process, those agricultural parcels then had deed restrictions placed that this property can't have, to my knowledge anyway. I can't verify this because I don't know the actual ordinance, but my question is to them, in that purchase of development rights, number one, is that second property, have they taken advantage of that? And number two, if in the this change to the ordinances, are they addressing that if they're changing things that would impact the purchase of development rights?
Right, so for purposes of what was put in your packet tonight, we typically copy the meeting minutes regarding the topics from the town plan commission and the town board. We didn't see any reference to the things that you're mentioning, but that's not to say it's not possible. I think if you're trying to get a direct answer on that, I think it would take a little bit more research on our part.
We could certainly do that, but we didn't know about it till just before the meeting started, so it would be
certainly reasonable to postpone a decision on this till next month, to allow time for staff to contact the town of Troy and find out if they removed the deed restriction, or if they transferred it to another parcel somewhere else in the town, or if one existed in the first place.
Right.
But Scott is somewhat familiar with this site and does believe that there is a deed restriction on it, so.
Just to correct that, I'm not sure one way or another, but I just want to make sure it's addressed. Because if, for say, that deed restriction was there, and if those development rights and zoning lock was placed on the property, to come in afterwards and change it would set them up for legal considerations from the people that purchased the development rights in the first place, where there could be a legal challenge.
Now I have a question about propriety and jurisdiction. Is it the county's responsibility, once a township has accepted the responsibility to do their own zoning, what level of due diligence do we accept, or is our responsibility when it comes to approving this type of thing? How far down are we required to dig when they make this seems like a reasonable request so that a company can do its business, and they've vetted the request. Are we responsible to do this type of due diligence going as far down as deed restrictions? That seems like some fairly detailed legal minutia that should be vetted at the township level where they're doing their own zoning. So, Ellen, could you kind of flesh that out for me?
I would say that the whole point of requiring a full county board to approve this shows that it is our responsibility to find that out, and that otherwise, I don't believe that the county board's approval is a rubber stamp.
Very good, then perhaps I would vote to table this. Maybe we should set it aside, but I can't make a motion as the chair.
Can I make a motion to withdraw my motion?
I'd allow it.
Okay, yep. Then I'll make a motion to withdraw my previous motion.
That leaves us without a motion. So we need a motion to ask to table this to a specific date, which would be next month. So I need a motion for that.
I'll make a motion to postpone this till probably next month, or our next month meeting, whatever date that is. I have no
And then
clue.
if we're not ready for it next month,
Yeah.
we do the same thing. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That puts us at the second half of this piece of business, which is the actual rezoning Town of Troy. That was just John, would you like to explain that?
I guess it would fall into the first action you took. I mean, I think we'd want to research it and bring both items back to you next month. That would seem to make the most sense.
Right, and because they were split into two pieces of business, we should have a very similar motion on the second piece. So I would entertain a motion to lay that on the table until next month as well.
I'd make a motion to table the second one for the land zoning change to allow for some questions to be asked in regards to the development rights, if they've been addressed.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to set this on the table till our October meeting. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Item number 4, review of the 2021 budget. Mr. Kenwit.
All right, now on to the exciting stuff for the evening. All right, so what we have here this evening are the department requested budgets. So everyone, the department heads have to prepare a budget request, submit that by August. And this is the first look at it that you guys have as the standing committee that has jurisdiction over these departments. So what we're looking for tonight from the committee is anything that you really like out of the budget request or anything you don't like. So as the county administrator goes through and has to make cuts to it, he has some input into whether that's a supported idea or it's something that you really want to keep in the budget, and you should probably leave that one alone. So that's what we're looking for, is anything that you have a strong feeling on one way or the other. When we look at the budget, one of the things that I would tell you to look at is the very first line. So the very first line is the general property taxes. Now the Register of Deeds, the first one that we have here in the sequence, is a negative amount. That's because they generate more revenues than they have expenses. So they have a negative property tax amount. So they're actually giving money back to the county, and we redistribute that to the other departments. But this is the best way to measure the tax levy that's necessary to support that department. So we went from $342,000 last year to $337,000. So that's a decrease of $5,000. So they're costing $5,000 more. So whenever I look at that first line and I analyze what the difference is, then I look to see where the changes are. So the next thing I would look at is I jump down to the net wages and fringes. So we went from $387,000 to $404,000. So we're seeing a fairly significant increase there. And you're going to see throughout all of the budgets, we have increases in net wages and fringes. We have a step increase that's built in for all of the county employees. And then we have an increase in our health insurance. We have a 6.82% increase in health insurance. So those two are the cost drivers through a lot of the budget that's driving net wages and fringes increases. So we see that that increase is larger than the tax levy amount change. And we look down then at the operating expenses, and the operating expenses are about where they were in the prior year. So there weren't any significant changes. So we went from $70,937 to $70,659. So I very quickly look through, I'm basically looking at three numbers until I see something that's a red flag, and then I go back and look in more detail. But that's how I go through and look at these budgets. So I'm going to go through the next couple ones a little bit quicker then, but if you have any questions on them, by all means stop and ask me as we're on that department. So the 5210 department is our parks budget. So we look at a tax levy last year of $454, and it actually dropped to $438. So there's a decrease in the total amount of tax levy. If we look at the net wages and fringes, we have an increase of about $40,000, about $35,000. So there's an increase there. Back up to revenues, because I know this will come up, is last year we had budgeted $252,000 for park fees, and this year or next year we're budgeting $300,000. So we were already at 166, and we finished last year at 277. That's why we're increasing the amount of projected revenues in the parks, and that's part of the reason for that decrease in the property taxes, even though we saw a fairly significant increase in net wages and fringes. Part of that increase in net wages and fringes too was a few more hours added on for seasonal park staff, or at least rates. I forget which way it was, but that's what was driving part of that increase. When we look at total operating supplies are within $1,000 of where they were last year, $328,000 to $327,000. So parks is looking good. When we look at resource land and water conservation, we see a drop in property taxes from $297,000 to $132,000. So we take a look at the budget, we see what is changing in this budget to account for that decrease. There was a $20,000 increase in fund balance applied. This one operates out of a separate fund, and so they have a fund balance, and so we apply some of that fund balance every year. We look at the net wages and fringes. The net wages and fringes were actually down by about $30,000. So there's a part of the decrease is that. And then the bigger part of the decrease is in the land conservation and cost sharing. You can see last year was $393,000 budgeted, and this year it's $225,000 budgeted. So that big decrease we saw in the general property taxes, most of it's attributed right there under that single line item. If you want more information on that specific line item, I'd look at Ellen to explain exactly what that is.
Is that due to a grant or anything, or?
Yes, we had a fairly large $300,000 grant we've been working on, and that will be closed out, so.
All right. The rest of the expenses within that department are pretty much the same as they were in the prior year, other than that one large change.
I got one question on page 52. Under, for this year, it's like, is report total, it's a negative number?
Yep.
How come?
So that is year-to-date through August 18th. And so if we look at total revenues through August 18th, we're at $242,000 in revenues. And if we look at total expenses, we're at $355,000 in expenses. So that's the negative $112,000. But that's a snapshot where we were as of August 18th. So we will have additional revenues come in, and there'll probably be some additional expenses. But overall, we're still on target to finish the year on budget. Okay, we'll get to planning, 6310. So we have no property taxes that support this. This is all supported through grants or through land records retained fees. If we look at the net wages and fringes, it's up just a little bit by $2,000, and the operating expense is about the same, as up about $2,000. So everything was contained within that, and again, this is a separate fund, and it does have some fund balance applied also. We use some of that fund balance as we analyze that and apply it every year. We get to 6410, that's the zoning department. So we have a tax levy going from $1,510,000 and $1,559,000, so about a $39,000 increase there. We do have some increasing zoning permits and fees that are offsetting some of the increases on the expense side. When we look at the expenses, we do have an increase in net wages and fringes, $1.47 million to $1.521 million. There was a pretty big jump in health insurance, probably greater than the 6.82. That's really dependent on the marital status of the employees within that department. So we budget health insurance specific to every employee within the department. And when we have shifts and changes in marital status or people have kids, that's reflected sometimes in the budget. So sometimes you can see that occurring in the budget, and that's probably the case within this department. When we look at the total operating expenses, it's very close to what it was the prior year, $389,000 to $390,000. So operating wise, they're doing well. The recycling fund, no property taxes support the recycling fund. It all comes through grants and some of the fees that we charge, as well as fund balance applied. When we look at the net wages and fringes, it's pretty close to where it was last year, up about $3,000. And the total operating expenses are actually down about $10,000, which balances that fund out. Hazardous waste. So we do have a property tax, about a $1,500 increase in the amount of property taxes. We do have a grant that comes from the state, and then these are our collections cost. One of the things I've looked at is that $52,000 might be a little bit on the low side. I would like to see that higher, and I've been looking at that in the recommended budget. Otherwise, total expenses are pretty close to where they were in the prior years. The library falls within this committee's, the standing committee's jurisdiction. So it's pretty much predetermined. The library levy is set based upon a formula, really, and that's already been run through the county board for approval of setting that rate. UW Extension, you'll see a small increase of about $3,000 in the general property tax. There's just a small inflationary change. It's primarily on this other professional services, which is the contract that we have with UW Extension. And so that's the only change really to point out within the UW Extension budget. The fairgrounds, they've requested a $10,000 increase in the amount of support for the fair. Yes,
I'm
sir.
going to support that this time.
Okay.
I think it's time. It's been going up pretty slowly. It's only 10 grand. They do an awful big service for the community,
Okay.
and especially in support of the ag education. It's time.
Okay.
I say something too? I just want to add that one of the reasons for the increase is that they're going to have a new building to maintain, take care of, plus cleaning up and maintaining the mess that might encompass making it. Since they didn't have a fair this year, a lot of the buildings on the fairground are not being used for 2 years, and everybody here can attest to what can happen to a building with nobody in it for 2 years, so it may need more maintenance for that. There was no Mayfair to raise them any money, and there was no rodeo to raise them any money. And this is one of the some multiple reasons for the increase, and I appreciate supporting it because it's going to be needed. Thanks. And I just want it known that we talked about this at the committee, if people on the full board raise questions about this when it comes about.
Okay. Thank you for the input. Economic development, we had no requested increase from the prior year's amount of support for economic development. Yes, sir.
Could we reflect in the budget somehow that they're holding a reserve fund in excess of $300,000, which is arguably taxpayer money? They hold a huge reserve fund, and we continue to give a sizable contribution each year, and they continue to hold 3 times that in a reserve fund that I don't see being used. Can that be reflected in our budget?
Yeah. So economic development to us is really a single line item. We support a private entity to promote economic development, but they are not a department of the county. They're not an entity that we regulate at all. Similar to the Fair Board, we don't regulate really how they end up spending that money once we give it to them. So it would be the same with economic development. I don't know how we would show their balance sheet in our budget.
Thank you. So any wrap up then, Ken? What else do you have?
Nope, that was the last department to review.
Do we have any other guidance for our county administrator? No, it's very good. Thank you. The next business item is a presentation on St. Croix County manure spill and brownwater event response plan. Mr. Tim Stevens.
I've got a PowerPoint. Is it in there or? Okay. Pass the document? Okay, thanks. Okay, this was our first draft of this plan. I'll try to touch the high points in the PowerPoint presentation. There we go. So this was the plan that we developed as a group. We had a fairly good input from public health prior to COVID, and then they were able to make comments on the plan right at the last minute. But we're still, we'd like to keep them in the loop as far as implementation, and you'll see where they're mentioned quite a bit. This is reflects one of the priorities that we had from the groundwater team that was priority 3, groundwater and surface water protection. And under that, there was 3 items that we were tasked with doing, and this is B, which was to develop a county protocol for responding to events that occur in our county that affect groundwater. And so we developed a plan that had 4 basic purposes. One was identification of planning and outreach that we could do ongoing year in, year out to try to prepare people to know what they're looking at and seeing, and then guide staff, kind of have a matrix for us to respond when things happen so we're not running around unorganized or we are inconsistent. And then ensure protection of public health, to try to provide recommendations that protect public health and the folks that live out in rural areas. And then also provide public transparency and fairness so that we respond to all these spill events in a consistent manner and in a timely way. So things sometimes get left to go if you don't have to follow a process. And that's important for the public to know that we've got a process to follow and that we are following it. First objective is some of the planning prior to any spill happening. First, we wanted to have the decision tree as far as steps to follow, and we were going to establish which county staff were notified, and we are going to rely heavily on the spill response hotline that DNR has, and we have multiple staff signed up for that, so we're all notified, and then we contact each other to determine who's going to go out and look at it and do the documentation. We're also going to maintain a tracking database of spills that occur in our county and do field investigation. And all of this is really to determine if there's a significant public risk. Sometimes some of the spills that come across the notification are very minor in nature, and that's okay. It's good when things aren't a big problem, but we're going to record those too. So if we determine there is a public risk, then we have, I'll show you in subsequent slides that we have different responses. And then we notify our partners, notification of partners such as public health, such as DNR and others. And then if it's bad enough, or we think there's high enough risk, we'll issue a public advisory. So that's really the last process. So we go through quite a vetting process to determine if there's a risk, and if so, how widespread that risk should be broadcast. Some of the communication outreach items that we have addressed in the plan is messages that we'd like to deliver as best we can through whatever means to inform the public of manure application and spill event procedures so that people know there's a process in place. Also, some of the messages were general in nature, related to the fact that we have quite a large amount of manure in the county that is applied totally legit. And so just because there's manure being put on a field doesn't mean we have to call the hotline. That would be a lot of calls. Also, we wanted to define expectations of all of the people that are involved in this process, and that would mean landowners. We'll hold them to what the law requires as far as containing, stopping the discharge, and that fact that they should report their spills to the DNR hotline, and then cleanup and restoration if it's necessary. Staff responsibilities and expectations were to handle each of these situations in a timely way. We have kind of a work attitude to where we work towards resolution out there, so we're trying to get resolution and get it cleaned up. And then we're trying to be consistent with state statutes and rules. If we ever have to go to some sort of an enforcement, those are really our only backing as far as why we would do enforcement with an individual, is that it's against a state statute or state rule or county ordinance, that we would be able to take it to that level. And then partner agencies, we try to define what we expect out of DNR and public health and DADCAP, which is a state agency that relates to issues such as manure and fertilizer. And some of those rules that they promulgate are important for us backing up in this area here. Fourth objective is how do we determine public risk, and that's outlined quite a bit more detail in the plan itself, but we considered the size of the spill, location, primarily relative to water. Something we're learning is very important is if there's sinkholes in the area. Now we have an excellent tool that we're just barely getting started to develop, and that is the presence of sinkholes, and they're really all over the county. If there's a sinkhole near the spill, that could contaminate groundwater very quickly, so we'd like to develop that sinkhole database over time, because that could be a very good tool to tell us if we're going to have problems related to a spill. Obviously, proximity to domestic wells is important. If there's domestic wells in the proximity, there's going to be a higher risk that those get contaminated. And then, of course, weather and soil conditions play a role. If there's a spill in dry conditions and it's cleaned up, there's really a potential for a risk at first, and then if it's cleaned up, the risk just drops. So if someone's cleaning it up, we probably wouldn't issue an advisory to a very wide area, because the weather and soil conditions are indicating that the cleanup will be effective at reducing that risk back to a low level. Kind of our process, I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's right on the edge as far as what I should have put in there. But in the plan itself, you can read it pretty good. I have it on a full page. Essentially, this goes through the flow chart, and it was an informative process to develop this. We receive a notification on our phones. It goes right to all of our phones, work phones that we have. One thing that we do automatically is I have a staff who puts it in the spill database. So even if it's a small spill that's cleaned up quickly, we still record it. Sometimes it can show a pattern if someone's having a spill like every 3 weeks or something. It would be good to have that documentation. So once that's recorded, we coordinate. We find out if DNR is responding to that spill. Sometimes they appreciate us going along with them. And I know that they appreciate our calls, because then they tend to do a quicker job if they know we're watching them. So now that we have 3 people on the DNR spill hotline, we're all calling them the day of or the next day to find out what they did, and then we even go out there ourselves. So then there's some items. The staff will go out and monitor containment of the spill if necessary, and then restoration, meaning picking it up, taking it back out on a field somewhere. If a lot of those things are ignored over a long period of time, we might consider legal action. Obviously, there's a bit longer time lag for us to go that route. Some of the public advisory items are that if we think a public advisory should not be, let me see if I can move that over. That got a little bit covered up by the page, but if we recommend that a public advisory not be recommended because it's so small or it was entirely cleaned up, then it pretty much dies over here. If we think it should be recommended, we inform public health of the level, and that could be as much as one household that's nearby or a couple of homes in the nearby area. Or it could be a really large area. As you've seen, a major spill could happen over an extended period of time. It doesn't get detected. We might have to do a mass mailing to a whole half of a town. That doesn't happen too often, but it certainly could happen. And so to that end, we have messages that are tailored to the 3 levels of risk, low, medium, and high, that we have drafted already, and basically they get modified for the specific situation and are delivered to the area that we recommend, whether it's one household, a neighborhood of dwellings, or to a whole area. And then the issuing of the public advisory, public health takes that role from resource management. And we delineate the area, we go through the size, the proximity to water, those sorts of factors, and we recommend a low, medium, and high. And then possibly will supply them or make available to them coliform test kits. One issue related to that is we're not in a position to cover the costs of those kits. Currently, we didn't want to put that in the plan as far as being able to cover that because we'd have to sit there and budget every year for an unknown. It's possible when we get into discussions that public health would be able to cover that, but that has to be kind of their decision. So we do have kits and we can provide them to landowners. Currently, we don't have plans to cover that cost. So that's kind of a flight over the plan itself, and I'm sure there's some questions, so that's the time we're at.
At what stage of this are you doubling up of what actual DNR is supposed to be doing?
I think DNR is focused on large CAFO size operations mostly. And then secondly, if manure is getting into a public waterway, if you get away from those two areas, it drops off significantly. So they'll have a staff person, but they have to cover quite a few counties. So if you have some manure that gets off a field and gets into a road ditch, I'm not saying it's not a big deal, but as far as that compared to getting into a stream or a CAFO, which they regulate directly, they take those fairly seriously. I can attest that they do get out there pretty quickly. I remember from last time when we were here about, what was the percentage? It was about 70% of the animal units we have in the county are not on CAFOs. And so in that regard, the staff that we have would be the primary line of follow-up. What we've found is that, DNR is pretty good about following up with CAFO-related matters. It tends to be a little slower sometimes than what we'd like to see. But as far as following up with some of the small ones, it just tends to fall off their radar fairly quickly. And we feel we could probably provide a little bit more presence in those smaller spills. So that's probably the difference.
At what point are you going to say small or too small? What I'm getting at is, I have calls as town chairman up there when somebody drops a little bit off the manure spreader on the way to the field. It's not really a health issue, I feel, but it could be a traffic hazard more than anything. We usually try and address it, but how many calls are you going to take for something of that sort? People don't like driving through it.
Right. That's a sheriff actually supposed to address that. That's a public safety issue. When you calculate it out, it's generally really, I've seen some bad ones that were significant, but manure is fairly low analysis, and it's hard to tell that to somebody who just washed their car in town and came out and got manure on there.
It's messy and it's stinky.
Yes.
And that's all they care about.
Yeah. So that particular one is a sheriff-related matter, but yeah. As far as the size issue, I think the table we have in the plan gets us close to that. See if I can home in on it. It might seem like a massive amount. There we are. So it's kind of a table related to spill size and risk. And there was something that was a starting point after we kicked it around a lot. Sometimes you can see a spill that you just think is massive because it might be your first one and it's like 5,500 gallons or something like that, and can be scooped up pretty quick. Truthfully, though, some of the spills from earthen structures that we've had have been in literally in the millions of gallons. So, we don't have a table that very significant risk, but those would jump into that category very, very quickly. So we feel that some of the small spills, like if you tipped over a honey wagon or something of that nature, that'd be on the low end because you can get at it. yeah, it looks bad, but it's fairly low risk. And then it goes up from there.
I have several questions, so
Okay.
I don't know. I guess one is, I would love to have under the glossary, you have spill there, but you don't have brown water. It'd be really nice to have a
Okay,
explanation of what brown water is.
okay.
For some people may not know.
We
So-
also had a comment that was called in. I got off the
Yeah,
answering machine.
that's, yep. And
Yeah.
I had that same question even before she called me. So you're getting
Okay.
that from two different people. That's one. And another is on page 74, on the very top of the page, or the second paragraph, if brown water event is reported through the DNR, it's considered and treated as a spill, but if it's reported through the DNR hotline, but if it's not, and it's reported through an official citizen's complaint, it will, I mean, what's the difference between the two ways? It's the exact same thing, but it just depends on where it's being reported as to how it's being handled. Is that accurate?
I think we could clarify that. We're going to treat them both the same. Sometimes it's reported as a citizen complaint and it was not reported as it should have been. And that can sometimes turn into be a bit of a factor as far as if we're going to do enforcement action. If someone hides a spill and doesn't report it through the spill hotline, in the some of the fact sheets in the end, it outlines when they're supposed to call. So what happens is the CAFOs know that they're a little bit under the eye. They tend to call in their spills. The smaller operations don't tend to call them in. So, and we can turn around and advise a citizen to call in a complaint, and they're kept confidential. So, and we may do more of that so that it enters, everybody gets notified and then it just tracks through. But it doesn't have to be reported through the DNR hotline. It's just that it makes it a little easier and more official.
Something should be added to that paragraph to say that they'll be handled the same way, even, because in one you talk about treated, and another you talk about tracked.
Okay.
That's just a quirk. And then, my other main thing is, and this has, in one sense, nothing to do with this. I'm opening maybe a can of worms, but is there some way for industries / farms, whatnot, to, if they're gonna start a business, they have to put a certain amount of money in a pot, and some of that money can be used to pay for water testing in situations where they have a spill. I'm just trying to throw, because there's a lot of people that can't afford to pay for multiple water tests, and if there is a spill, they're not gonna wanna have just one water test. They're going to want to have several to make sure it's getting better, and that adds up. And so, I'm just throwing out if there's some way of doing that, and that probably, I don't know if that would come under community development or business or whatnot, but, you hear about a lot of businesses get together, and and it wouldn't have to be that much, but just there's a pot to help pay for water tests. That's just a comment. And actually, my last question is, if you have someone that's leasing a house to someone, whose responsibility is it to make sure that the water is tested every year, and who pays for it? Is that the landlord or is that the renter? Is that spelled out someplace?
I have not seen that spelled out.
That might be something to look at.
I think realistically, that would have to be negotiated between the landlord and the renter.
But if it's not, then who's responsible for it?
Yeah, we'll ask.
I think I'm done.
Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got just a few questions. The first one, do we have adequate staff to fulfill the needs of determination canvassing, like under the pre-spill planning?
I think we could always use more, as you would expect me to say. I feel we're a little weak on that. I'd love to do more. You never feel like you're doing enough as far as communication and outreach. You know, there was a day when we used to have, you know, more staff time being able to put towards those kinds of things. We got out more, and now we seem to spend so much time, you know, working on, you know, administrative duties, and we just have to be more responsible and accountable a lot of times with regard to money. That's kind of universal, though, as far as other counties have reported that. There's just no end to the amount of outreach you could do because we're dealing with rural folks, so the only way to really get the word out is to just be present at a lot of their functions, and a lot of their functions now aren't even happening. I was very concerned about that when all this COVID hit, is that a lot of the main avenues for us, our staff, to get out and meet rural landowners has been taken away, and that we talk about a lot of different things when we're doing one-on-one visits like that. So if we get back to normal, I think we'll be okay. But that said, I don't think that's an area of strength of the plan.
Is that being one of my concerns with it? Because if you don't have the strength available for it, it makes the objectives kind of weak to try to fulfill them. So, but I totally understand what you're saying on it. The second question is, when you do have spill actions, is this all coordinated with emergency management? And are they trained for these type of issues? Does the DNR give them any sequence of classes or anything so that they're aware of what the is when you're put into the position that there's an emergency? You don't want to be guessing what you have to do. You want to make sure that they're well informed.
These things we're going to reply to or respond to as staff are outside of emergency management. So emergency management would reply if there was like a large truck of chemicals tipped over, or something of that nature. We're dealing with runoff from manure, spilled manure, a storage that went south and started leaking out across the road and was like, now we've got manure where it wasn't supposed to happen. That sort of thing. Emergency management doesn't deal with that.
So in an instance, like if we had the spring floods and you had a large manure spill that went down river and impacted a whole bunch of people and their wells went under and stuff, do we have the staff just at your level to be able to accommodate?
It would probably have to go to a real general, radio, mailing type of thing. Yeah, going door to door would be difficult.
Okay.
We could, but we could respond. We could pull people off of other things for a couple of days if we had to. We haven't had to do that,
Let's hope we never do. But
Yeah.
Scott,
Yeah.
I'm gonna piggyback, because that is exactly a point. When we had the big spill, way back when, in 2015, that was a real concern of the committee, that perhaps we didn't respond quickly enough. And if we had one that was even bigger, if we really had a monster and it was a real serious public health, do we have the support of the public health department, and could we get enough people to actually go out and canvass and tell people boil your water? Just because we don't want people to get sick. That's a commitment that I'm hoping to see, that we would have that support from the department and from the public health department to do.
I mean, we could probably brainstorm a little bit on that, because when you have 4 or 5 motivated people, you can cover some ground. And I think we would be able to muster what we need to do that.
I'm not talking about for that honey wagon that, spills over onto the ditch. I'm talking about, 3-4 million gallons into the sinkholes and river and such. I'm talking about a serious spill. So.
I think that when you have a serious spill, a moderate spill, contact the local municipality. They'll help. They know how to get a hold of their people. I think that that's just a real action that needs to be done,
Okay.
no matter how big it is.
I was going to work that in for something that's like almost outside of the bounds of what we cover in here.
Also, something I didn't see is should we be contacting Farm Bureau and Farmers Union and automatically just get involved with the professional organizations and maybe, I don't know.
Just two more questions or a comment, a question, a comment. One was, in more of the rural communities where they have municipal water, and they're located where they could be in contact with things, have they developed wellhead protection maps or anything?
I think there is wellhead protection maps for most of the communities. I think there is. I'd have to check to make sure. I think that was kind of a requirement. They have them, right? Wellhead protection maps for most of the small communities? Yeah. So those would be, we would be able to check those. We have GIS, so we would just turn those on and see if the spill was inside that. Then that would just affect that whole community. Yeah. Let me try to make sure that that's addressed in here.
Then one last. I have one last one. In those kind of form letters that you'd developed, might it be a good idea if you're asking for them to do water testing, that you may also accommodate them with a listing of vendors or provision of test kits for the water?
Okay. Yeah, that's an area that needs to be fleshed out, and we don't want to go so far as to say we'd pick them up, but truthfully, if we could collect them and get them to a lab, and that would help. I know it's a hassle. I know myself, and I have a package. I'll carry the thing around for 4 days before I finally get it to the post office, just because I don't, run out of time at the end of the day or something. But so taking care of that process might help.
Tim, this is incredible. What's our next step in this process?
I got a lot to do, just from what you guys had some excellent suggestions. I think we want to maybe discuss with taking it to public health, to their committee, and getting their input, and then working on a more final draft before we bring it back.
Helen, what do you say?
I would recommend that. It's not a problem. We would review it. I believe in my review of it, I found quite a few little things that need to be addressed, so it's a draft. It needs to be reviewed, fixed up, and answer your concerns and add the things you've brought up, and then we'll bring it back next month, hopefully.
Next month, or if that has to be November, well, we'll be happy to see it when it's ready.
Okay.
Thank you very, very much, Tim.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, Ellen's going to talk to us about motorized boat launch fees.
I'd have to go a little faster here. All right. So as you might recall, last month we talked about a request that we had received from Supervisor Anderson to discuss, as part of the fees, to discuss fees for boat launches. So at that time, Staff asked for more time to prepare more information for you, which we did, and which is provided in your staff reports. The information covers, starting out with this, it points out that what do we do? We currently have 4 motorized boat launches, and I did identify them as motorized because that's for motorized boats, not electric trolling or canoes, kayaks, etc. So they're part of the county park system. We have Glen Hills and Glen Lake, Pine Lake, Bass Lake, and then through agreement with the DNR. The Bass Lake one is through agreement with the Wisconsin DNR, and Squaw Lake through agreement with the town of Star Prairie. Operation and maintenance, there's a lot of things we do at all of these, of course, lawn mowing, picking up garbage, repairing ramps, which sometimes can be quite extensive. Removal of the courtesy docks every year, any kind of work that's needed to be done on them, chip sealing, crap filling, lane striping of the parking lots. Glen Hills and Pine Lake also have restroom facilities which require regular maintenance and supplies. Glen Hills obviously has an attendant, and Pine Lake has a winter aeration system to prevent fish kill, and all 4 landings are open year-round for ice fishing, etc. So the one at Glen Hills, people do pay, obviously, to get in. They pay a daily or annual park permit fee. Our county park permit system does not differentiate between residents or non-residents at all. At this time, the county does not charge a fee to launch motorized boats at Pine Lake, Bass Lake, or Squaw Lake. So the discussion is whether or not to begin charging at these 3 sites. Our recommendations I will address at the end. Couple things I believe I put in this next report. So how do we charge fees? So we did our research, and Wisconsin Administrative Code NR 1.91 parent 11 is what authorizes us to, if you so choose, to charge fees. If we do, there are quite a few rules that apply. Quite a few rules. So launch fees can only be collected for the operation and maintenance of the boat launch. I would not need to have anything like a segregated fund or anything like that. The county has a system. We would very easily be able to justify what we spend. We don't need separate budgets, nothing like that. But it still would mean that it needs to be understood that that's where those monies are. We would be spending at least that much every year. Launch fees have to be based on the daily state park entrance fee. Surcharges can be added without a problem. There's quite a few. There's a whole formula for how to do that. I've gone through it, looked it over. The surcharges are if you have things like attendance, on-site restrooms, landings able to handle larger boats. I checked, all of our landings are able to handle the largest size boat that they identify in the DNR statute. So in that situation, we're able to charge the highest surcharge. If a launch fee is charged, a seasonal or annual pass has to be made available. Non-resident fees cannot exceed 150% of the resident fee. As I said, right now, we don't charge non-resident fees. And I feel that currently most of our facilities in the county park system are used about 75% or more by Wisconsin residents, not Minnesota residents. There is a lot who come over and use Perch Lake, for instance, and a few other places, but we're talking about the whole entirety of our system. If we do charge, state and local taxes also have to be charged and paid, of course, which we are already doing for everything we charge at the parks. All of our park fees include state and local taxes that are paid out to Department of Revenue. So here's some of the things just to think about. Revenues would decrease operation and maintenance costs to the county, but they would not cover actual costs. As an example, this year we are doing driveway and parking lot improvements at Pine Lake for about $22,000. It'd take a long time with a lot of boat launch fees to recover that alone, let alone all of our ongoing operating costs. Same is true at Bass Lake. This year we put about $27,000 into Bass Lake's boat landing. We got a big cost there was we corrected a runoff problem, and to get the runoff, instead of going directly into the lake, to go into the stormwater pond that's adjacent to the landing. So again, it would take many years of collection of fees in order to recover those costs, let alone the ongoing operating costs. There are significant improvements needed at Squaw Lake. We've been talking about and planned on putting in next year's KIP. We thought we would apply for a sport fishing grant to make some improvements up there. And again, we're looking at about $15,000 is our estimate. So all those things are just factors to understand. This will not cover the cost. It probably won't significantly reduce the county fees for parks or the county budget for parks. We have received financial support from the Sportsman's Alliance. Every year they have roughly a $4,000 grant. It goes towards a lot of different projects in cities, villages, towns, all throughout the county. For instance, this year it's going towards the Pine Lake project. Many of those projects have nothing to do with county parks, but every 3 years there's a county park related project. Last year's project went towards creating helping create the parking lot at the new Orff Overlook, for instance. So the Sportsman's Alliance does do that, and I did contact their chair and talk to him about it. He really wasn't pro or against. He thought he would reach out to some of his residents, or some of his members, but I have not heard whether they're for or against fees at the boat landings. If we did do this, we would probably eventually add restroom facilities at least one of the parks. I believe the town of Star Prairie already provides a restroom facility themselves at the Star Prairie boat landing on Squaw Lake. We would probably not provide an attendant. We don't provide a continuous attendant anywhere except at our manned parks. We would have to purchase a fee safe. Those are about $110 each plus concrete installation. Everything would be on the honor system. I think that's very important to note. We would make some checks. I talked this over with our parks administrator. Basically, we would probably check on weekends, and we would probably ticket or notify that they need to pay the fee. We'd take down license plates, and we would collect those from those people. Whether we do it 3 days all weekend long, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or whether it be 1 day a weekend, I don't know at this point. It would depend on how much our staff could fit this in. We would definitely collect some money. Our estimates are probably $2,000 to $3,000 a year. So perhaps at each of the sites, but again, I think that would just basically be a break-even situation. And there'd probably be Monday through Friday. There aren't that many people who use the landings Monday through Thursday, I should say, except perhaps on a holiday. And so I don't think that we would be doing a lot of checking except on holidays. On the other hand, I do look at it, and I wanted to point out a couple more things. I did last time suggest, had a chart, and I've got that chart in here again, but perhaps the county would charge a very small amount, like a very low amount or something, more of a token fee. And the more that staff and I talked about it, the more we felt that we would be creating a whole lot of extra work for ourselves, an extra printing cost for a separate fee, confusion for those who already have an annual park fee and perhaps purchase that in order to go to Glen Hills. Daily fees are very straightforward. It'd all be the same in our system. So if we realize that if you do decide to go forward with this, we are recommending that the same current park fees be used, $10 and $30 for our annual, and that's just very close to what this is almost exactly what Willow River State Park charges, and it's pretty closely in line with some of the area fees. We wouldn't have any problem with charging either of those numbers. Based on looking at the surcharges allowed, we could charge higher, but I think that there's no real reason to do that. So at this point, staff would recommend moving forward with that. I think that there was a letter of support from the Bass Lake Rehab District, and we have the gentleman who spoke earlier who's in favor of that. I think there's some reasons for it. Whether or not this would actually decrease usage at Bass Lake, I have my doubts. As was pointed out last time, this would be a boat launch fee, not a parking fee. So even if people parked on the road, that's an issue for the town to decide, town of Somerset, and whether or not in Wisconsin, it's very clear in the statute. It's a launch fee, not a parking fee. So that's the way it would have to be treated. So I just wanted to let you know that. Here's the chart we provided, kind of looked around at neighboring area and other counties, and even went a bit farther afield just to see if other parts of the state were different. And you can see it's pretty close. We didn't put in any non-resident fees because, again, I would not want to start charging that. As far as I'm concerned, you're adding a lot more work for my staff. So at this point, if there's any other additional information you'd like, or if you have any questions, be happy to answer them.
How, I can see on the honor system paying $10, but can the machine delineate when they have the $30, or are they going to have to come here to buy a $30 pass?
The way we do it now at all of our parks is if you put in the self-pay envelope that you want an annual pass, you pay the $30 because that's on the signage and explains it. You pay your $30 and within a couple, 3 days, we have mailed out a annual pass to you. And it works very, very well. We have no complaints.
Okay, and this only takes cash, not any kind of credit card?
We don't at this
Or
time,
cash
but
or check?
you could cash or check, but we could certainly have looked into it, and we are planning on exploring credit card stations. We actually probably wouldn't be that hard. It's coming down in cost every year, and I would say within a year or so, we will start putting in self-pay stations. That's, for instance, at the Loop Trail would be our first priority that will take credit card.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Yeah, Sean.
So the level that the yearly pass is set at, I understand that Glen Hills and Willow River have the same price. But
No, and I have to just say that Willow River is just slightly different. Theirs is 28, not 30. I rounded up, sorry.
That's all right. Understand that it's about 3 times what the daily pass is. My understanding is that people tend to go to the same lake all the time, and so like 3 times of the regular rate, most people are just going to buy the yearly rate at that point, and we're not going to really help anything.
I talked about that exact same question with our Parks Administrator, Aaron, and he said he thought that about a third of the people, maybe half, probably more like a third, would buy the annual pass. Because the other thing is, people, yes, they do tend to go to the same lake, but there's also a lot of fishermen out there, and fishermen is a huge number of the users who love to keep going back, or love to keep going to different lakes and trying their luck. And so he thought that we would have both kinds sold. And yes, like I said, it's not going to pay for the big ticket items. $2,000 to $3,000 a year, maybe even as much as $3,500, depending. We would definitely be able to cover the staff costs we're already paying for. Staff going out there once a week and mowing, picking up garbage, cleaning up. Staff are already out there weed whacking. They're already out there checking up on things. We get calls and complaints and stuff quite a bit. Every year, it takes quite a bit of staff time and effort to put out all the courtesy docks and bring them all in. We don't leave them in the water over the winter at any of the boat landings. For instance, the other facilities like Pine Lake and stuff, go out there every week. We also clean the bathrooms, that kind of thing. Right now, the new ORF facility, that's a whole nother set of dollars, and that's, the bathroom will be there, so we'll have the Potter pot, and that's going to have a connecting trail to the boat landing, so that I'm pretty sure would already be considered providing a restroom facility, and we already will have the cost of pumping that in addition, and the time spent cleaning that weekly. So any of those things would just simply facilitate a decrease in the county costs. And again, I don't I'm not married to do this or don't do this. I'm open to any direction, and so is my staff, that the committee wants to go, but we do have recommendations. And I think at this point, having researched it a bit, I do think, and looking at how many places do charge already, Somerset charges, Troy charges, City of Hudson, City of New Richmond. I was surprised the City of New Richmond charged. The state park does, the Glen Hills Launch does, across the river, and we only listed a few of the ones across the river. There's quite a few more. Dunn County doesn't have any fees, but Pierce County does, so it was interesting to learn that all up and down the river, There's quite a bit happening. Polk County doesn't have any fees to use the landings, but it turns out that they actually have an agreement with the town of Garfield, which is where all their landings are, and so they pay, they manage it for them. And again, it's a very similar fee, so.
I just want to make the comment that both at the annual meeting for Bass Lake and at the committee meeting for Bass Lake, there was as close to unanimous support as you can get. I didn't hear one person that didn't want fees to be applied at this landing, and there was clear understanding that this would apply to residents on the lake too. So I just wanted to make that comment.
So I'm correct in, it's a launch fee, so like ice fishing, if they park there, they won't have to pay, correct? Is that what you're saying? Because they're parking then?
Well, I'll have to check on exactly the wording, but I did note that the wording said it's a launch fee, not a parking fee. So ice fishing, I would think that if you launched and took out a shack, then you might have to pay because you went out onto the water. I don't know that. I don't.
I just think that needs to be defined, right?
Okay, sure.
Now, if the ice house falls through the ice, that's a launch, and you're going to pay.
Because now it's floating in the water.
Right,
Yeah.
right, that's, okay.
I'm just wondering if the $30 for the year, is that good for all of them?
Yes, it's good, and it also is good for every county park.
So why would anybody buy a daily if they're going to have that at every?
We already have that, and we sell a lot more dailies than we do annuals.
Really?
Yes. So I know it's a heck of a good deal, and you're right. Can I quote you on that? Why would anybody buy a daily? But it's the truth. We sell a lot more dailies than we do annuals right now.
Maybe we should have a motion to print a sign, why would anybody buy a daily?
Dick Hessling, Chair, Town of
Yep. So, have we walked this pony around the room often enough here? Should we put a motion together here?
I got one more,
We got more
just
Okay, all right, we have
clarification to what Dick just asked. So if someone buys a $30 annual thing for Glen Hills, it also get, that same pass will get them onto any of the lakes and into launch in at the Willow River? Or
Not
is
Willow.
each one specific for just
County,
that?
county system. No, and a $30 county pass, annual pass, gets you into Glen Hills County Park, Homestead County Park, Troy Beach County Park, the Pine Lake Boat Landing, the Bass Lake Boat Landing, and if
Okay.
the town of Star Prairie agrees, I said that would definitely depend on what town of Star Prairie wants to do, then it would get you into that one too. And we
Okay,
would
so
of course
just
go to
one,
Star.
you don't have to do it for each individual place?
No.
One? Okay.
No.
That's what I wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Did somebody else have?
Yeah.
Okay, Scott?
Just wondering too on, I know in the town of Star Prairie, they have, at the Apple River Park, there's, actually, it's almost now becoming a commercial venture where there's people bringing in big giant trailers full of kayaks and launching from the Apple River Park. And then they're picking them up down at, what's it called down there? Riverdale campground area. There's
Right.
a landing down off of County Road C.
Is this, you're saying this is in a commercial operation where someone provides it and people go to the Riverdale site, then they get their, they pay for a kayak rental and get their life jackets, and then they get a ride up there and then they canoe down, kayak
Yes.
down? That happens in a lot of counties in this state. We could certainly add that anyone who uses it for, in fact, our ordinance actually requires already that if they're using it for a commercial venture, then they have to come meet with us. So that if you can let me know who that company is, we'll be happy to follow up and tell them they're already violating our parks ordinance, so.
Okay. Very good. Any other conversation? And do you want a motion to approve this? We need a motion to approve this fee structure.
I'd make a motion to approve the fee structure that was outlined tonight.
at $30 annual and $10 daily to cover all our parks.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Ellen, excellent work. Staff, excellent work. Thank you very much. Sean, thanks for your involvement. All right, our final business item is,
Take a little break before.
oh, yeah, why don't we take a break? We'll have a 5 to 7 minute break and reconvene at 6:37 or so. Back, folks. Let's get to business. We're gonna, Julie, I'm sorry to catch you off guard. Oh, yeah, okay. We're going to have two more business items. We're going to do number 7, UW Madison Extension staff presentation, but then so you don't lose your attention, I'd like to tell everybody that I'm going to go back and revisit the town of Troy because the Troy town chair has come to our meeting and asked us to do so. So don't get up and leave right after the UW Madison Extension staff presentation. So right now I'd like to introduce Diana Alfuth. I hope I pronounced that correct. Where are you? I don't see you. I don't see your picture. Are you there, Diana?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can see you. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm always happy to come and talk about horticulture programming and education that we have going on in the area. Is there a way, I do have a little PowerPoint, is there a way I could share my screen? I think you guys have to stop sharing before I can share mine.
You should be able to share now.
Okay, is it up there now? Oh, yep, I think it is. Okay, so this is just a short PowerPoint. I was told that I should talk for about 10 to 15 minutes and let you know what our UW Extension horticulture programming is in the area. So to start out with, as part of UW Extension, we have a couple of different institutes, and horticulture is a program within the Agriculture Institute. So we're kind of the cousins to the agriculture educators that help farmers and all that sort of a thing. Across the state, we have approximately 11 dedicated horticulture educators who do horticulture programming throughout the state. Plus, we have agriculture educators, or ag agents, as they've commonly been called, who also do horticulture responsibilities. So not every county has a dedicated horticulture person, but we're fortunate here that we have at least a portion of one with me. We also bring to the table our campus-based specialists. So with whatever expertise and skills that we have in the counties, we have the university standing behind us, and at the university down in Madison, we have a wide variety of campus-based specialists that we can connect into. The two biggest ones, I have their pictures there on the side. The one on the top left is PJ Leash. He's our insect lab diagnostician, so he can identify any and every insect that we need identified, as well as controls or tolerances for them. And then the bottom picture is Dr. Brian Huddleston, and he's our plant disease diagnostics clinic specialist, and he helps us with all the plant disease stuff. But we also have other specialists, including turfgrass specialists, woody plants, fruits, vegetables, and everything else that we need to help us with our programming in our local counties. So my position is a 50% position. It's shared between Pierce and St. Croix County. So each county chips in basically for a 25% position. I've been around here with Extension for over 20 years. So for over 20 years, I've been doing some form of horticulture education and programming in St. Croix County. I've lived in St. Croix County, and now I live kind of on the border, so I'm very familiar with the area. My job, mostly the focus is consumer and community horticulture. And what I mean by that is consumer horticulture is basically local residents. So I help all of the local residents with their horticulture education needs. Community horticulture basically refers to municipalities, school districts, county grounds people, those kinds of things. And I also do some assistance to commercial horticulture. So that would be the garden centers, the lawn care companies, the tree services, that sort of a thing. Even though I don't have the time to really focus a lot of programming on them, I am here as a resource for them, and I can get them connected to our state specialists if needed. So mostly what I am is a resource for local residents for their horticulture related needs. And the way I look at it is my job is, my mission is environmental protection. So you can see my pictures there on the left. The top one is the spray can, and homeowners and residents use way more chemicals and pesticides than farmers do. If you're looking at an acre to acre basis, homeowners are so willing to grab something and spray whatever it is that is not to their liking in their yards. So what I do is I sort of intervene with that sometimes. So I'm here for them to call and say, you know, I have this is what's happening. I was going to do this. And I can say, no, that's not going to be effective. And at all of Extension, our role is to be research-based and non-biased. So the difference between calling me and asking what they should do about the spots on their tomato plants versus going to a garden center is I'm not trying to sell them anything. And I can tell them what exactly the problem is and then how it would need to be treated or if it needs to be treated. So again, environmental protection, I think, is one of the main goals of what I do, as well as personal and public health. Because again, if people are using those pesticides, they may be exposing themselves personally to it, or if it gets into the environment, they're exposing the environment and other people to it. So, and there's also the benefits of horticulture. So there are a lot of therapeutic benefits, a lot of physical benefits to engaging in horticultural activities. And so I get involved with a lot of those things. And then there are a lot of economic benefits to it as well. So personally, obviously, there's the picture on the left there of the home garden or growing a garden so people can grow healthy fresh vegetables and fresh produce. They might be supplementing their grocery budgets, but it's not all about vegetables. It's also about yards and gardens. And the other picture there is the landscape, and people like to have nice looking landscapes, and that has a lot of economic benefits, both personally because it can raise the value of your home by like 15%, but also from a community standpoint, there's all kinds of research that I could talk about for hours of when businesses are more likely to move into a community that has a nice welcome sign and has well landscaped areas and that sort of thing. So a lot of what I do a lot of variable things, but there are a lot of different benefits to it. And again, protecting the environment is one of the main goals. So what I do specifically, like on a day-to-day basis, one of the main things, especially during the growing season, is that I field inquiries from local residents. So anybody in St. Croix County can call me if they've got a problem with a plant, if they want to know what to do. And I cover all kinds of plants, everything from lawn grass to fruit trees and landscape trees and shrubs and vegetables and fruits and houseplants and even household insects, because they kind of get thrown in there. So the pictures I have on the left are just pictures that I've received that I've had sent to me with questions in just the last few weeks. So a couple of different insect outbreaks. And again, when people see a lot of insects on their plants, the first thing they want to do is nuke them with an insecticide. And sometimes they're beneficial insects, sometimes they're harmless. And even if they do need control, I want to make sure that people are using the proper products in the proper way so that everything is safe. We have spots on leaves, especially this time of year. People see browning leaves and spotting leaves and they want to spray something for it, and it's absolutely useless at this point in time. And the other picture on the left there is a picture I received just last week of a tree with straps around it holding it together. That tree is split, and I get a lot of these sorts of things. People want to save the trees. Trees are valuable, that's great, but this tree is not going to make it. And it can become a health hazard because it can fall down. And so sometimes what I'm doing is counseling people because they're very sad to see their plants die. And but I can give them recommendations on what to replace it with, how to properly plant it, how to properly prune it so this doesn't happen again. And again, that relates to a lot of the benefits that they get from having shade trees in the yards, with air conditioning, with property values, and on and on. So I deal with just about anything that is a plant. I also teach the Master Gardener training. We have a very robust local Master Gardener volunteer program, and I'll expand on that in a minute. I also teach consumer horticulture classes. And again, when I say consumer, I mean just open to the public, local residents. So normally each year I'll do 12, 14 classes in various locations on different topics, usually topics based on needs assessment, based on what calls I'm getting in, where I see people really need the information. And I also do classes for other entities that ask me to. So sometimes I get asked by ag education teachers in the schools to come in and do something to their classes. I talk to grounds crews like the City of River Falls, public grounds crews on various things, especially when that comes to invasive species or outbreaks of things. So I worked with a lot of the municipalities in the area when emerald ash borer was first hitting, wild parsnip, that's an issue in the ditches and roadsides, those sorts of things. Part of what I use to help to educate people about things is we have 2 learning gardens. And again, I've got a few pictures of those coming up here, but both in New Richmond and in River Falls, just barely inside the St. Croix County line, we have a couple of learning gardens that are used as tools where people can learn about growing vegetables at home. So I do a variety of things. Again, it's mostly a lot of inquiries during the growing season. Those are still coming in regularly. In a given week, I'll answer 40 to 50 calls or emails from local residents. And as the season goes on, then we get to more of the classes and stuff in the springtime before things start growing. With COVID, we have some current challenges, and when it hit in March, I had several classes scheduled. I had classes on evergreen diseases and control. I had an apple grafting workshop scheduled and a few other things, and we had to either convert those to doing those virtually via Zoom, or a couple had to be canceled, like the apple grafting one. That was kind of hard to do via Zoom. But in order to pick up to keep connection and to keep the service out there, I started doing weekly Zoom educational sessions for my Master Gardener volunteers. So the Master Gardeners are an invaluable resource for us, but they need to have updates, they need to have support. And so we started doing weekly Zoom educational sessions for them, talking about what was breaking out at the time, and getting into some in-depth education for them. They have continuing education requirements, and of course, with everything shut down, a lot of those opportunities disappeared. So that is one of those silver linings of the COVID pandemic, that by doing these weekly Zoom things, it's really worked out well, and it's really been beneficial for the Master Gardeners. So it's one of those things that will continue. I'll continue to do those in the future with them. The Master Gardener activities have been limited because of COVID. They are usually out there in our area. Our Master Gardeners, it's a joint program between Pierce and St. Croix County, and our Master Gardeners in these two counties will contribute about 7,000 volunteer hours a year. And that's a significant value to our communities. This year, things were really limited. They weren't allowed to go out and do a lot of the events that they do. They have usually done, they have booths at the fairs, they have booths at the farmers markets for Ask a Master Gardener kinds of things. They do a variety of gardening projects in schools, work with school gardens and nursing homes and senior centers, and they put on workshops and all kinds of things that weren't able to happen this year. So keeping connected with them has been a little bit of a challenge virtually. I am going to do fall Master Gardener training. Usually I do it every year in person. This year we're going to do it virtually. We have registration is open right now. We have about 16 people signed up so far. And because we're doing it virtually, I'm partnering with some neighboring counties as well to reach those residents. I'm planning Zoom webinars for the public starting probably in January and February. A lot of times I don't do in-person classes in the middle of winter because we get snowed out and iced out. But now that people have become more comfortable with Zoom, we'll be able to do those in winter as well. And the biggest thing was that all of the inquiries and the telephone, emails, inquiries from local residents have been able to continue, even though we've been working remotely and not in the office. My office is in the Pierce County extension office. Even though I cover both counties, I have a little stop-off place in the St. Croix County office, but mostly I am in the Pierce County office. But with the technology of phones and voicemails and emails, the inquiries have been able to continue and get covered in a timely way. And during the growing season, I field several thousand calls or emails from local residents on issues and problems and questions about horticulture. So that is a really important thing. Like I say, if I'm not here to help them, they will go ahead and do something that's maybe not that safe. Horticulture is an area that is a real challenge because there's a lot of what I sometimes call barstool wisdom out there, where people hear, oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. And a lot of it is not effective. It's downright dangerous. And the internet has actually made that worse in many cases because there's a lot of poor, non-research-based information out there. So our local Master Gardener program, again, is a joint program with Pierce and St. Croix County. We have usually we average about 200 active Master Gardeners at any one time. It's one of the largest programs in the state. On a per capita basis, I think it is the biggest. We have to remember that the Master Gardener program is a volunteer development program. So it's not really about gardening. it's about volunteering. And the Master Gardeners help with educating our local residents because, again, we have a lot of demand and a lot of interest in horticulture, especially in St. Croix County, where there's a culture of protecting the environment and having outdoor spaces. And there's only one of me. So we need the Master Gardeners to help with that. The Master Gardeners also help beautify the community, and they do a lot to contribute to hunger prevention efforts. Our local Master Gardener Association is the St. Croix Valley Master Gardeners. They have a big plant sale out at the Octagon House in Hudson every year that they raise several $1,000s, and then they turn around and they give it out as community grants for horticulture related projects. So they're very involved in the community. They have a lot of presence, and they are a huge asset. And I'm very, very thankful for having all of their assistance. We also have, as I mentioned earlier, I have 2 education or community gardens. The demonstration and learning garden is in River Falls. That's the picture on the left when it was just getting planted this spring. And then we have one in New Richmond right next to the county building on Dorset Road there. Use these as educational tools. Usually we have garden walks, several garden walks where people can come. We walk through, we talk about things, we do demonstrations, proper ways or good ways of trellising and mulching so that you don't have as much maintenance to do, all those sorts of things. We do programs for youth out there. Both the Master Gardeners do things as well as we do things in partnership with 4-H. And all of the produce that gets harvested out of these gardens gets donated to the food pantries and other hunger prevention efforts. So it's a win-win, and they're a lot of fun and a lot of great opportunities for that volunteer development because our volunteers take leadership roles and get involved in other areas of the community as well. So just a couple of pictures. This is the River Falls Garden, the demonstration and demonstration and learning garden. And every year we pick a theme. A couple of years ago, we had Peter Rabbit in there, and we had a great storybook garden where kids could walk through the garden and read the different pages of Peter Rabbit, and we had all kinds of rabbit-related stuff out there. Last year, it was superheroes, and this year, in honor of COVID, we decided to do a COVID garden, which was actually a lot of fun because it gave us an opportunity to talk about diseases in the garden and how a lot of the things that we had been hearing about COVID also apply in the garden. So proper spacing, keeping plants socially distanced so there's good air circulation and therefore less fungal diseases, and prevention by using mulches so you don't have weeds and you don't have to grow them, and controlling the spread by trellising plants, and the Master Gardeners had a lot of fun with it. We had a big write-up in the local Rivertown's papers on it, and again, these are a couple of pictures. Our scarecrow every year gets dressed up for the theme, and this time she was the guardian with her hand sanitizer in the apron pocket and her mask on. The bottom right corner, you can see this is last year's kids garden program that we have. We call it Junior Garden U, and we have some Master Gardeners help, and we teach small groups of kids a whole variety of different topics related to nature and the environment and gardening, and they have a lot of fun with it. So we weren't able to do that this year, which was a shame. Hopefully next year we'll be able to get back at it. But these gardens are set so that there's signage there so that people can walk through the garden and learn even if we're not having an actual event there. And then this is the garden next to the county building in New Richmond. It got moved here 2 years ago, so this is its second year. Again, a lot of labeling of plants. We want to expand this one. We were going to this year, but with COVID, we didn't. But next year, we want to have this one expanded a little bit more with some more demonstration things. We do different variety trials and stuff, and have some more events out at this garden as well. So, but again, the produce all goes into hunger prevention efforts. So that's a snapshot of what I do in a short amount of time. My contact information is right there, but if anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Any questions?
Can't see the last digits of your phone number. 715-273-6781.
6781.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Very good. So if anybody wants to move their blueberries or talk about pests in the garden, they'll give you a call. Thank you for your time. That was an incredibly detailed
Yes,
presentation.
very
Thank you
good.
very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna move back to business item number 2 and 3, and I'm going to ask for unanimous consent to reconsider these items. If anybody objects, now's the time to say so. Otherwise, I will accept unanimous consent to consider. I consider that unanimous consent. Thank you very much. At this time, we're going back to resolution, and just walk with me here, I'm going to go fast. Resolution approving Troy, text amendment to the Town of Troy zoning ordinance 170. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I would ask for, and we'll have discussion on this as soon as we get a motion. I'd like a motion to approve that, and then we'll have discussion. Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll have a motion to approve the text, it's the text
This is business item number 2.
2, right, I already took my thing off.
I'd second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'd like to ask the town chair from Troy to step up to the podium and explain what the heck's going on here. Please introduce yourself, say where you live, and
My name is Dan Pearson, a resident of Troy Township and also currently the town chairman. So I understand there were some questions about the text amendment, or what?
right, Mr. Counter.
Thank you, Dan. Dan, the first one with the ordinance changes, in the review of that, to do those ordinance changes, was the purchase of development rights issues addressed in any way, or were there any considerations that they would impact the ordinance as you changed it?
Good question. So, for many of you, if you don't know, we have a TDR program, transfer development rights, that can go between properties. I won't get into that, but just try to explain. We have a process when you rezone that you have to clarify where the development rights are, and then if it's going out of exclusive ag, you have to put an easement on the property if it's, where you have to clarify how many development rights there are. In this case, it was a 5-acre lot, which would just have one development right. I'm going to go sideways here a little bit. So we challenged whether they needed 2, because there was also a house and a commercial, and that's where maybe some of the confusion comes up, because that was some of our discussion that maybe wasn't clarified very well. Because you need a development right for each house, and then you need so much for a commercial development. And they chose not to keep the house as a house, and so therefore it's just a commercial property, so it only required one development right. And so that was one of our major discussions in this whole property. So we want to make sure you do it right. It's our first time taking exclusive ag and moving it into commercial property. And with the consent of our staff and lawyers, it was pretty clear that if we kept it to just a commercial property, that it would fit well within our ordinance. So in order to allow that, we had to change our commercial code, because right now it was allowed in other, meaning any other commercial. But if they ever changed, that would give them freedom to do a whole bunch of things that we maybe didn't want. So by changing it to, and I don't have the exact terms, but the commercial that we allowed it in, then we could put conditional uses on it as well. So to do that, we needed to change our ordinance and make them fit under that particular commercial category. And that was agreed by the Plan Commission ahead of time. So this has been a long process we've gone through to do this one, especially because it's, I know we've been at 6, 7, 8 months. And so I believe at this point we've clarified everything with the development rights, and it fits our ordinance, it fits our comprehensive plan, and so that's why we wanted to bring it forward. So I gave you a lot at one time. Hopefully that helped clarify a little bit of it.
I'm satisfied. Corporation Counsel, Scott Cox, do we have any, are we satisfied? Or do you have any questions or comments?
I'm satisfied and I don't have any questions.
That makes me happy too. Anybody else have a question or comment? All right, we have a motion and it's been seconded. All in favor say aye. 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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Moving on to business item number 3, rezoning Town of Troy, Malter Glover Road. Do we have a motion?
I'd move to accept the rezoning for Glover Road, Moulter.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Announcements and correspondence.
Thanks for coming back.
I'd just like to remind everyone in the audience and in the meeting that our clean sweep household hazardous waste collection will be next week, Thursday, the 24th, from about 2:30 to 7 p.m., and also Friday, the 25th, it's open to the public from noon to, was it about noon? Yeah, noon to 6 p.m. So household hazardous waste collection for farmers and small businesses, very small quantity generators, such as churches and that kind of thing, also is in the morning on Friday. So
Next week?
next week, the 24th and 25th of September. Okay?
Any other announcements, correspondence? Requests for future agenda items? Please pass those along as the month progresses. The date of the next meeting is Thursday, October 15, 2020. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.